Today, in current events from a Christian perspective, Israel strikes back at Iran. Let's take a look at what happened and where we are on the way to World War III or not. Then President Biden changes language once again, this time in Title IX, which moves the idea of man and woman into basically whatever gender you want to be. This effectively makes women's sports a thing of the past, allowing whatever man wants to claim womanhood and then destroy every single women's competition from here on out. So that's terrible. And in other news, Governor of Florida, Ron Desantis, says that the grade school chaplains can't be Satan worshipers. So that's fantastic. All this and more today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. Really appreciate you stopping by today. As always, my name is Matt Odegaard, and I am your host looking at current events from a Christian perspective. If this happens to be helpful for you and you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Like, why wouldn't you? You might want to. And hit the notification button if you happen to be on a platform with notification buttons so that you get these each and every time they come out. Trying to be somewhat regular in sending these out to you as I have time to. It's just a labor of love I'm doing for you to help you live out your faith. As well, if you want to leave a 5-star review or leave any review or hit a comment if you're on the YouTubes or wherever you happen to be, really appreciate that. And of course, as always, you can support at churchpublic.com/support. All right, let's get to some wacky news today. At any rate, this is good. This is an update on Israel and what is going on there via the Daily Wire, which was the best summary of the whole situation that I could find in looking at some of the latest news, and that is that Israel finally struck back at Iran. Last weekend, if you recall, Iran struck Israel with some 350 drones, missiles, etc. Israel was expecting it was going to have to fire back against Iran. Now, there were a bunch of different options. I'm not going to go through all the different options. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately, what they decided on was a targeted strike limited to inside of Iran to warn them that if they decided they were going to escalate, then Israel would say, hey, don't, which is not what Biden said. It is what Biden said. At any rate, they did it with showing what they do rather than what they say, which is actually an interesting and important distinction, that you can say a bunch of words, but until you do something and put some action behind the words, as Israel has just done, sometimes words are just words. So what Israel did was a means of deterrence. This is reading from the Daily Wire, probably the best available scenario for both America and Americans' allies. If Israel had gone really heavy, continuing in the Daily Wire article, there was always the possibility of serious escalation via Hezbollah, etc., and that could have turned into this larger, full-blown war, World War III, as people are predicting. Though, if you remember a couple of episodes ago, I mentioned it's probably not going to happen because that's not what anyone wants in the region. Of course, anything is possible, but that was my prediction at the time. The message from Israel, effectively, according to the Daily Wire, was, listen, you guys fired 350 drones and missiles. We knocked nearly all of that down. Basically, we can hit you at any time, anywhere, so stand down. Again, that was straight from the Daily Wire. And that was the goal from Israel. And this is the interesting part that I think is important to note, again, from this article, because that strike was so limited in nature, the Iranians had an off-ramp, or so to speak, to deny any of it ever happened or minimize it, which, of course, is exactly what they did. So you remember, Israel struck Syria and killed an Iranian general or some Iranian officials, and then Iran fired back to save their face, and now Israel has fired back to save its face, and we're just going back and forth for this, thing for thing, and now maybe everybody's satisfied. It really is unclear, and we're going to have to see. But since Israel did not do more of a serious strike, it is likely Iran will not at this moment up the ante. Again, we'll have to wait and see. It gave Iran the idea, the possibility of basically denying anything ever happened, which appears to be, in essence, what they're doing now. Once again, I don't want to say that I called it, but you can go back to the tape and hear that. In fact, I said, this is not World War III. It's just posturing. It seems to still be the same thing. As I mentioned, I'll just keep an eye on it, and we'll have to see what continues to happen in the region. We can pray for all of those involved. Where I left this issue last time is the same place I'd like to leave it this time, and that is, we need to pray for the Jews, pray for the Muslims, pray for those in the countries surrounding the area. Everybody there just needs some Jesus. And without Jesus, it's going to be really hard. And I would wager, actually not wager, I would say with certainty, it's just going to be impossible to find peace, because the only way for peace is through Jesus Christ. All right, let's come back to America now and Title IX. This story frustrates me, but it is what it is. And we got to talk about it. So Biden and the Education Secretary Miguel Cardona have revised a law from 1972. That law, included in and connected to Title IX, basically separates men's and women's sports so that women have a chance of, well, winning. Now it has been revised to clarify, quote, sex discrimination includes discrimination based on sex stereotypes, sex characteristics, pregnancy, related conditions, sexual orientation, and gender identity, end quote. If you heard that and you were listening to that and you understand what they're saying there, the law used to be sex characteristics. In other words, gender. In other words, men cannot compete with women because men and women are different. And everyone has known that for all of time until the last 5 minutes. Now the law states that sexual orientation and gender identity factor into how you're able to participate in sports, etc., in scholastic adventures. So that means that if you identify as another gender, so if you're a man and you're pretending to be a woman, you can just play whatever sport you want. This is an actual disaster. Like, it's just so terrible that I say we. I'm not going to say we. It is so terrible that the Biden administration has enacted into this law or edict or whatever that now if you just pretend to be a girl, a man can go in and become the best woman he can be, and just ignore all of reality. So yeah, this has a spiritual component as well. That's even a bigger thing, because reality is reality and truth is truth, and you can't ignore it forever and get away with it. You just can't, even though they think that they can. So to respond to this, former collegiate swimmer, Riley Gaines, said with this 2024 revision, Joe Biden has basically abolished Title IX, policy that was originally enacted to protect women and girls. Let's see, I've got her tweet here. She said, in a nutshell, the new rewrite means, here's the list. Men can take academic and athletic scholarships from women. Terrible. Men will have full access to bathrooms, locker rooms, etc. Again, terrible and gross. Men could be housed in dorm rooms with women. Terrible and dangerous. Students and faculty must compel their speech by requiring use of preferred pronouns. So again, now they force you to lie because they say that you have to use preferred pronouns. This is a problem. And I believe she went on to say that you can even be charged with harassment because of this, which is absolutely true. And this is, I say many, many times, lying is not loving. There is a commandment in the 10 commandments, the big 10 commandments about lying, thou shalt not lie. And the reason you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't bear false witness, is because truth is truth. Truth is really important. In fact, later on in this episode, I'm going to talk even more about truth because it's so important that we get the truth right. If we mess up the truth, there is no foundation with which to stand, which is the direction this happens to be going, because once you just throw truth out the window, anything can be anything, and that is indeed a problem. Let's see. I think I have one more response. This is Liz Wheeler. Same idea. Allows men on girls' sports teams, locker rooms, scholarships, preferred pronouns. It's the same. It's the same message. Again, just that you can be charged with harassment if you don't acknowledge the lie that they've put in front of you. And yeah, this is 1984 level stuff where you are forced to lie by the government. But beyond that, it is religion breaking information as well, because you cannot believe in God and bear false witness, because if you do, then your religion, your belief isn't worth anything. If you are not true to your word, and the word is not true, and God is not true through his word, then in fact nothing is true and nothing is real, which of course is the ultimate end that they're trying to get to. They are prescribing imaginary things, so they have to make you say the imaginary secret words in order to make everybody feel good. It is unbridled empathy to the end of you just can't live in reality anymore. Now, on the one hand, it's terrible and gross, and people are going to get hurt or worse through this edict. However, it also cannot last forever, because you can only lie for so long before people say, no, I will not live by lies. I just hope and pray that's sooner rather than later. All right, a couple more things going on around the world and around the country today. The next one that we're going to go to is Desantis. Governor Desantis in the good old state of Florida. He is banning Satanists from being chaplains in school. I'm going to go ahead and play this video, and then we'll talk about it.
A school chaplain program that somehow you're going to have Satanists running around in all our schools. Please understand, we're not playing those games in Florida. That is not a religion. That is not qualifying to be able to participate in this. So we're going to be using common sense when it comes to this. So you don't have to worry about that. And to me, just as a Navy veteran, I mean, I really view the chaplain program in schools similar to how we have military chaplains. You would go and you'd have different types of chaplains. I mean, we had Jewish rabbis, we had Catholic priests, we had evangelical pastors. We had a whole bunch of different options that people could do and pursue. Many people in the military didn't pursue. Many others did pursue, and that provides, I think, really useful resources.
All right, you get the idea. Basically, he is not going to allow representatives from the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple to be chaplains in schools, grade schools in Florida. This seems like a great choice. Where this is coming from is there was a bill, HB 1317, that was signed into law that changed the way chaplains could be in schools. And so this would put chaplains in Florida schools when the bill became law. So the what's this guy's name? The guy that leads the Satanic Temple. I apologize. I thought I had his name written down here, and I don't have it. But at any rate, the guy that leads the Satanic Temple said that if you do a school chaplain program, you're going to have Satanists run around in our schools. Oh, sorry. I have my notes all messed up. Desantis said, some have said, if you have a school chaplain program, you're going to have Satanists running around in schools. And that's what they wanted to do. The Church of Satan has said, or the Satanic Temple, I can never get them straight, that they would put them into schools. Desantis, of course, as you just heard, said, no, we're not going to play those games. It's not a religion, so they can't qualify in this. And this is the reality. So the Church of Satan is, I think they're suing the school system, and they're going to go through this. Or again, it may be the Satanic Temple, Church of Satan. I know those are different organizations, but it does stand to note that the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple, I'm going to get wrong every time. And honestly, I don't care that much. If you're worshiping Satan and whatever you call yourself, that's just not great. So DeSantis is saying, no, you can't do this, and you're not actually a religion. And that's the point that I want to draw down as we're talking about current events from a Christian perspective. The Christian perspective is that worshiping Satan is not a religion, because it's not, because Satan is not a god, and you can't have a religion based on something that is not a god. Like, this is basic reality, theology, epistemology. Like, the basic understanding of reality is, to worship something, it has to be something. Now, of course, you can worship idols and you can worship fake gods and that whole thing. So I guess in that sense, you could, but then you're worshiping something that is false and not real. So if you're worshiping a god, it has to actually be a god. Now, not all religions are equal. There are people that are pointing to the idea that all religions are equal. So religious freedom means you can just have any religion anywhere, do anything. Of course, that's not true. It's never been true in America. It's actually not true in any country. But you need to understand that that doesn't make sense. sense, and it actually is very dangerous. Now, if you look into olden times, right, back in history, the Aztecs, they sacrificed babies, they sacrificed people, human sacrifices as part of their religion. The Hindus conscripted young girls into the temple for prostitution. Those were just a couple of things that happened across the world and across time. There are a bunch of other really gross things that religion has done throughout the years. So they're not equal. They're not the same. Yes, you can say, too, that some bad things were done in the name of Christ. I would point to the fact that those things that were done in the name of Christ that were not great were in spite of what the Bible says, in spite of who Christ says. The things in some of these other religions were because of what the writings say, because of what their beliefs say. So there is a difference there. People are going to do bad things regardless, but the people that do bad things in the name of their God are a problem. The people that do bad things in spite of who their God is and what their God says, that is a different animal entirely. Hopefully you can understand that. So now to current politics, current religion, current this thing that is called the separation of church and state, which is not the same thing as people think it is, but this subtle way, people have been lulled into this place of thinking religious neutrality is a thing, that religious freedom means any religion can have freedom to do anything. And of course, that's not true. It goes back to this idea of authority. Who has authority? Who has the ability to lead as a god? And is there one God or are there multiple gods? Of course, people are saying different things. But in America, which is founded on Christian ideas and Christian beliefs and the Christian religion, it has never been that way until recently, of course. You have these liberals, these leftists masquerading as Christians, or they call themselves conservatives or something else, libertarians or something like that, and they just claim we all need to get along. They just claim that you be you and live your truth and just do whatever you want as long as it doesn't affect me. But the reality is, of course, it does, especially when it gets to religion. Religion affects everybody, and this is what we see. If you say just live your truth and everything is the same, then you get to the point where Satan worshipers or people in the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple or whatever it is can be a chaplain in a grade school in Florida. And of course, that's ridiculous because worshiping Satan is not good. It's not a moral good, and you can't have a right to do a thing that is not a right thing. This leads us to like that weird, Satan statue that got put in the capital of Ohio over Christmas because if you can worship Jesus, you can worship Satan. And of course, that's not true, and it's never been true. You can't live in a way where you just pretend that all religions are equal and all gods are the same. And in fact, as I mentioned again, Satan is not a god. He's never been a god. Even the Church of Satan says, and the Satanic Temple admits that there is no actual Satan. They just go along the tenets of the Church of Satan. You can go back in the archives. I went through their whole 7 tenets at another episode. I'm not going to do that again today. You can go back and listen to it if you want to. But the point is, you can't live in an immoral way and pretend it's a right. Worshiping Satan is inherently wrong. It's morally wrong. So that's where you have to begin your view of what a law is and what a religious right is. If you're doing an evil thing, there is no world in which you have a right to do that evil thing from a government perspective. A government cannot justify an immoral wrong behavior to be a right. Now, I know that immoral people tried to do this, like, Roe versus Wade, and now the president and other people in the administration trying to codify into law a new Roe versus Wade where you're able to kill children at any stage in their development up to and even including maybe even after birth. Of course, that's evil, and we should fight against that because you don't have a right to kill people. And you can't enshrine into law the idea that you have a right to kill people, et cetera, et cetera. But even people should understand, even non-believers at some level understand that what is morally good and what is morally evil is different. Taking the, babies out of the issue, of course, you can't just go walking down the street killing random people and everyone just thinks it's okay. Everyone knows that's wrong because there is a difference between moral good and moral evil. So worshiping Satan falls into the category of always and in every situation being wrong. Therefore, the people who lead the Satanic Temple or the Church of Satan can't be the people who lead children in our schools. There's just no right to do that. So there's no right to allow them to function as a religion and to be a chaplain in a kid's public school. That's just ridiculous, and we need more pastors with a spine and politicians like Desantis who say, no, we're not going to do this. So That's enough on that one. Let's keep going through this and move on to NPR, National Public Radio. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I'm actually going to go fairly quickly. I hope through this one. I know that's probably impossible for me to do, but I will try. I have a lot of thoughts about NPR, and I don't want to spend too much time on them. What I want to do is talk about this new, I think it's the CEO of NPR that was put into place, Catherine Mayer. And she has a lot of weird tweets that were going around. I'm not even sure at time of recording if she is still the CEO, because there was some rumblings whether that was going to keep going. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. I have 2 points that we're going to look at. And one is we're going to look at a video from her where she talks about truth, and her views on truth from a Christian perspective are interesting, if not wild and scary. Then just understanding at a base level that NPR is not conservative. It is definitely not Christian. It is not on the right at all. It is not even in the middle. It is totally leftist, completely leftist. If you go through the issues that they came behind and stood behind in the last several years, if not many, many years, they have all been issues on the left. Every single one of them. There is no right leaning at all. There is no right representation at all. There's no conservative. There is definitely no Christian in NPR. So I guess that's just a public service announcement to note that you're not going to get that there. So without further ado, we're going to listen to this video of Catherine Maher in a TED Talk where she talks about truth. And this is interesting, so let's listen to it.
The hard things, the places where we are prone to disagreement, say politics and religion. Well, as it turns...
Okay, I was going to try to not jump in, but I have to jump in and say the first thing she talks about are the hard truths in politics and religion. Let's keep listening.
Turns out, not only does Wikipedia's model work there, it actually works really well. Because in our normal lives, these contentious conversations tend to erupt over disagreement about what the truth actually is. But the people who write these articles, they're not focused on the truth. They're focused on something else, which is the best of what we can know right now. And after 7 years of working with these brilliant folks, I've come to believe that they are onto something. That perhaps for our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth might not be the right place to start. In fact, our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done. Now, that is not to say that the truth doesn't exist, nor is it to say that the truth isn't important. Clearly, the search for the truth has led us to do great things, to learn great things. But I think if I were to really ask you to think about this, one of the things that we could all acknowledge is that part of the reason we have such glorious chronicles.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. I can't listen to any more of this. If you say something like, our search for the truth has been great and truth is great, but if anything follows that sentence, then you've lost the plot. Like if your goal, this is something. If you're saying that, one, she said, basically truth doesn't matter and we're revering truth too much and we should just make up our own thing. She said, our reverence for the truth is a distraction of finding common ground and getting things done. I want to come back to that. And then she said, well, truth matters, but, which essentially means truth matters, but it actually doesn't matter. So I'm going to say a bunch of other gobbledygook words that mean, yeah, I don't care about the truth. I'm going to make up my own truth and you live your truth and we're just going to come to the middle because that's fine. Okay, so she says our reverence for the truth might be a distraction from getting things done or finding common ground. I mean, both of those things, right? Like truth is common ground, which everyone has known and should just be clear. Like if we can know the truth and get to the truth, then we can understand it and come to a place of compromise, not even compromise, of understanding because we agree on what reality is. Truth is truth, therefore reality is. Now we're in this weird philosophical place in everyday life that says there is no truth, live your truth, make up your own way, go your own way, you be you, you do you, whatever, which all of those phrases mean there's no absolute truth. There's no thing that you can actually know. And she even mentions that in part of this. If you heard it, she says, truth is one thing, but really it's how do we know what we know, which is epistemology and some other things, but in philosophy. And we won't get into all of those pieces right now, but just understand that if you're searching for the way that you know something and you're not searching in a way to find the truth of the something, which philosophy has done for all of time up until the post-Enlightenment and postmodern era, now we're in the place where we say, well, you can't actually know what truth is. No one can know. It's impossible to know what real things are, and it's impossible to know what truth is. That's the new philosophy, which of course leads to the idea that you can't know. And then when you hear really high-level politicians or Supreme Court judges asked, what is a woman? And they say, I don't know. Now you know the reason why, because they really live in the stream of philosophy that says you cannot know. You cannot actually know the definition of a thing. You cannot actually know what a thing is at all. You can't, period, full stop. Like, that's the end. So when this lady says, well, I don't think we can actually know truth, that's what she means. She means you can't know truth. And we just need to find a way to find common ground and get things done, because we know that you're not going to actually find the truth. There is no actual truth. But of course, as Christians, we know that there is. So the reason I bring this up is you may have listened to that and thought, well, she speaks really well, and okay, that makes a little bit of sense. And you may not hear the anti-Christian rhetoric in the video clip, but if you are actually living in the very nature of truth and you read a lot of Bible and theology, you hear someone who is bashing the very nature of truth, which means they're bashing the very nature of God. That's just what's happening here. And we'll go to the word for this and say, well, John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the truth. So how does that square with there not being truth, or truth is impossible to find? Well, that's actually the opposite of what the Bible says. Therefore, it's anti-Christian. Like, if you say, no, you can't find the truth, but Jesus says, no, you can, there is a truth, and I am him, then we have an ideological problem. Things are not squaring together, and we're living in two worlds going on two paths that cannot intersect. Then there's a second one, or maybe a first one. If you go back to the beginning of John 1, where it says, Jesus is the Word. The Word is God. The Word is with God in the beginning, and Jesus is the Word. Then the word in place of truth, because words are what you speak and Jesus is the truth. And so God is truth and God is the word. I mean, like, all of these things are equal and they're co-equal together. And when you say, well, we can't really know, we're just going to write words and hope that we come to compromise somewhere in the middle, that's an anti-Christian thought. You can't just make up random things grounded in nowhere and hope that you aim at something. You'll be aiming at nothing. Then I'll just give you one more in the scriptural world, and that is when Jesus encounters Pilate. So if you remember the story, or if you read this during Easter, you know that Jesus was taken to the authorities. He came in front of Pilate. Pilate was trying to figure out, who is this guy? What has he done? How do we figure this out? And the question Pilate asks, which is really important, and 2,000 years ago, really applicable. Today, the same, really, really applicable, based on what you just heard from this lady. He asks Jesus, what is truth? Listen to this little part from John's gospel. You can go and read this for your own in John 18. Starting in 23, if Jesus says, if I said something wrong, in other words, if I lied, if I made something up or whatever, tell me what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why do you hit me? Because he was being beaten, and they were saying he did blasphemy, which is speaking against God. In other words, saying words against God or saying words that are lies. And Jesus said, hey, if I lied about something, what is it I lied about? And Pilate says, I don't know. So they talk about this for a moment, and Pilate says, hey, Jesus, they say you're a king. Are you a king? And Jesus says, you say I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me. So Jesus essentially says his role in the kingdom of God is to say he is the truth, to explain the truth to people, to explain what the kingdom of God is, what reality is, what creation is, what you are in the kingdom of God. That is Jesus' role, to explain this to us and to everyone with ears to hear, coming out of Revelation, which is also a letter from Jesus. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me, Jesus says. So Pilate says, well, what is truth? In other words, he was the very first postmodern and deconstructionist in saying, well, we can't actually know. We can't actually know what true things are. Like, obviously, philosophically, we can't know what truth is. We have to water it down. Like this lady said, come up with compromise, come up with something else and figure out what that means. But of course, that's impossible and ridiculous, and we shouldn't try to do that. Okay, let's keep going on. I think I have one more story that I have time for today, and that is a place called NatCon and National Convention. This one, for instance, took place in Brussels. I'll read out of the Federalist in an article that I found about this one. But here's the deal. Last Tuesday, the Belgian police surrounded and shut down the National Conservative Conference, NatCon for short, on an order issued by Emir Keir, the mayor of the district the conference was being held. The order was to, quote, guarantee public safety. So, Mayor Keir had a view of public safety that he wanted to shut it down in order to, quote, and he had declared that the vision of NatCon, quote, is not only ethically conservative, but focused on the defense of national sovereignty, which implies, among other things, a Eurosceptic attitude. I think that's supposed to be Eurocentric, but I don't know. Some of the speakers, he said, are reputed to be traditionalists, so the conference must be banned to avoid foreseeable attacks on public order and peace. In other words, if you didn't read between the lines of that order, the order is if you like families and marriage and not the 11,000 genders and the LGBTQAIP hashtag plus squiggly emoji $sign cult, and you maybe even are a Christian and like conservatism, conserving the things of the past and are anyway on the right, then you're bad and we have to shut you down. Essentially, that's what I read from it. So, by the way, as a side note to understand all of this, the country of Belgium in 1830, there was a freedom of speech and assembly enshrined in their constitution. So it is nothing new to be able to say true things and to be able to say really whatever you need to say. And yet this particular mayor said, no, you're not able to say those things. We're going to go ahead and shut it down. The prime minister then wrote a tweet. So the mayor shut it down. The prime minister said, what happened in the Claridge today is unacceptable. Municipal autonomy is a cornerstone of our democracy, but can never overrule, the Belgian constitution guaranteeing the freedom of speech and peaceful assembly since 1830. Banning political meetings is unconstitutional, full stop. That was the tweet that he wrote. So why does this matter to us? This matters because this is the state, the regime saying you're not allowed to have free speech, you're not allowed to have full discourse, you're not allowed to have truth. I connected these stories together because it really is talking about the same thing. It's really talking about this issue that you just can't have free speech. If the regime, if the powers that be, the politicians, the celebrities, all want a certain thing to be true, which is not true, like a man can be a woman, then somewhere in there, someone has to police the speech and say, no, you can't say true things anymore. Because once you say true things to false things, the false things become not true because they were never true to begin with. But people ignore that and just shout louder, which of course, this is just an example of. Now, the ostensible reason for shutting it down was a threat to safety. And at that time, there was actually no threat to safety. From the Federalist, the event, was supposed to be a 2-day affair featuring people like Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, British politician Nigel Farage, German Cardinal, so a member of the church, Ludwig Müller, French writer, et cetera, a bunch of people, both politicians, thought leaders, church members, church clergy, and all of them were told no. So police and riot gear arrived, blockaded the entrance, barring anyone from entering. Then, much later in the day, according to the Washington Post, about 40 protesters showed up and chanted slogans 300 feet or so from the conference venue. In other words, when they shut it down, there was nothing going on. There was not even a protest there to say, well, this isn't safe, we're going to shut it down. The protesters hadn't even arrived. So, in the end, a Belgian court acted quickly, struck down the mayor's order. It was a late-night legal challenge, and the conference got to continue. The decision from the court noted, quote, it doesn't seem possible to infer from the contested decision a peace-disrupting effect is attributed to the Congress itself. In other words, the court decided that There was no safety threat at all that was coming from these people meeting together. Right. So, reading more from the Federalist, how could this happen, one might ask, in a country where human rights are supposedly sacrosanct? The answer is straightforward but unpleasant. Europe may have been the cradle of Western civilization. I love the way they write this. But today it is post-liberal and post-Christian, which means the basis for things like free speech and freedom of assembly is gone. Why is that? Continue to read here. Because once you reject normative claims about the human person that give these ideas coherence, they go away. Having rejected, this is reading from the article, this is so good. Having rejected the Christian teaching of Imago Dei, the image of God, on what basis are the political leaders of Brussels going to affirm that everyone has the right to speak freely? I'll continue reading and then comment. Human rights such as freedom of speech are only self-evident if one accepts certain underlying claims about God and man. So this is what we've been talking about, that truth is based on something. Once you remove truth from something or someone like God or Jesus, who is the author of truth, then truth can be anything. In fact, there is no truth. And that is where this society wants to go, because they want to say things like a man can actually physically, literally, biologically be a woman, which of course is ridiculous because it's not biologically, realistically, or spiritually possible, but they want it to be so. So they have to say false things and make you say them too. And now we're back again to the discussion about Richard Dawkins that we had a few podcasts ago. You can go back and listen to that. He is a self-proclaimed atheist, been an atheist for a long, long time, but he said about Christmas, essentially, that he loves Christmas and he loves the Christian culture and even calls himself a cultural Christian, but he also doesn't want there to be Christianity. I made a joke about baking the cake in the oven of Christianity, but not having the oven of Christianity, which of course is not possible. And that's what he wants, and that's what these people want too. They want a liberal secularism that is nice to everybody, but you can't be nice. You can't have love. You can't have truth without a foundation that comes from. There just is no foundation other than God for truth. Once you remove this, then you just have nothing, and the culture will fall apart because it can't hold together on its own. It just can't. You have only two options, and I say this a lot, but it's really important. You have only two options. They're Christ or chaos. There's no third way, and we're seeing the fruit of that more and more every day. Chaos is exploding everywhere, and we see it. It's obvious. So we must pray that Christ, while he is Lord of all, would indeed reign in the hearts of courageous men who would stand up against this godless tyranny. For Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard. Keep the faith. Once again, thank you so much for stopping by Church Public today. Man, I really appreciate you. And if you heard the audio version, you want to see some of the videos and pictures, go to churchpublic.com or YouTube. And if you want to subscribe, I really love that. If you want to support, go to churchpublic.com/support. We will see you next time.